Alright, we are going to be talking about Blue Lock, and the thing I want to talk about today is the new Gen 11 problem that has crept up in the Neo Egoist League. Now, to begin with, the concept of New Gen 11 was introduced as early as Chapter 4 with Sai Itoshi. And pretty much the explanation that we get is the best 11 players from each position are then heralded as the next generation players. The three new Gen 11 players that we have been introduced to so far are Sai Itoshi, Michael Kaiser, and Don Lorenzo. In Sai Itoshi's case, we get to see some of his feats during the Under-20s game where he pulls off casual passes that the Blue Lock 11 didn't even think was possible. He also shows us multiple high-level passes throughout the game. Later on in the game, before the halftime whistle was blown, we also get a display of his ability on the ball, where he can completely embarrass Rin Itoshi, as well as blow by Bachida and Isagi with ease before whipping in yet another impressive pass. Later on in the game, after Baro scores, Sai Itoshi decides it's finally time to get serious and enters flow as he says that he's raising the game's level. Surprisingly, this is then revealed to us later in the manga during the Neo Egoist League that Sai Itoshi had also begun using Metavision. When Sai Itoshi begins his advance, he is able to completely destroy Blue Lock 11 numerous times and can make even crazier passes, although in the end, this did not amount to much. Now, with this, it creates a certain problem. And I wouldn't even say that the problem is with the narrative of New Gen 11s, but I think the problem is with the perception of New Gen 11s for the fandom. The reason that I say this is because multiple times during the Under-20s game, Sai Itoshi's passes are intercepted by many different characters. As well as the fact that Sai Itoshi deciding to get serious during the game and enter flow as well as using Metavision wasn't because he just decided to do that. It's because his team was backed into a corner. What makes this even worse is that once Sai Itoshi decided to get serious, he started using Metavision, he entered flow, it really didn't amount to much because his passes were still being intercepted and he tried the same dribble move on Rin Itoshi, who was able to stop it. So although we are shown that Sai Itoshi can control the game, Sai Itoshi as our first introduction to the New Gen 11 didn't seem as far away from the rest of the cast as maybe he should have been. And due to people in the Blue Lock community recognizing that these Blue Lock players have gotten exponentially better throughout the Neo Egoist League, they are forced to make arguments for Sai Itoshi, saying things like he wasn't going all out, he was only using 10%, and many other headcanon arguments. Now, I don't actually blame the Blue Lock community for this. A lot of people seem to believe that this only happens in series like Dragon Ball, however power cliffing is very apparent within Blue Lock. Now that we have gotten the Sai Itoshi portion of the video out of the way, it is time to move on to the next New Gen 11 player that we were introduced to, that being Michael Kaiser. We are introduced to Kaiser in chapter 156 and we are made aware that he is the striker of the New Gen 11. And considering the manga continuing to hammer in the value of a striker and that being a striker is the main focus of the manga, it would not be a stretch to assume that Kaiser is the best of the New Gen 11. With such expectations on his shoulders, Kaiser would have a lot of hype that he would have to live up to. To begin with, in the game against FC Barcha, we see a lot of Kaiser's plays through Isagi's POV, so they obviously get glazed to the moon to emphasize just how impressive Kaiser is in comparison to the main character. Kaiser also gets good setup through his goal against FC Barcha, as his Kaiser impact had surpassed even Isagi's ideal playstyle. Moving forward, the Manshine game is where we get the first bump in the road for Kaiser. Kaiser allows Isagi to draft up his own play as he gives him the ball, and then Kaiser is shown to be able to easily see through it and interrupt the play. Kaiser is then shown using Metavision to survey his surroundings before he then uses Predator Eyes to execute his Kaiser impact between 5 players. Listening to all of this, you would believe that everything is sailing smoothly for Kaiser. However, Kaiser's downfall begins after Isagi is able to analyze Kaiser's formula and puts it into practice. The moment Isagi begins using Metavision, he is able to read the movements of everybody and works his way through Manshine alongside Corona, allowing himself to get into a position to score. Now, although Kaiser gets in his way and forces Isagi to miss, this was Isagi finding the ticket to supremacy that would allow him to stand up to and surpass Kaiser. Isagi, while using Metavision, is able to see the same things that Kaiser can see, and he is able to make the same interception that Kaiser attempts. Isagi continues to creep up towards Kaiser's level play by play. Isagi, for the majority of the Manshine game, is the main focus and the one who is facilitating the most plays, while even showing the ability to outsmart Kaiser. This leads to Kaiser acknowledging Isagi after only his second game in the Neo-Egoist League and issues him a striker's challenge to see who gets the most goals in their upcoming game. Moving on to the game against Ubers, this game was absolutely awful for Kaiser. For the majority of the match, he isn't even able to do anything because he's being locked up from minute 1 by Don Lorenzo, the third new Gen 11 player that we are introduced to. The Ubers game starts with all eyes on Isagi. Isagi snatches the ball away from Barrow, he links up with Corona and is able to outsmart the Ubers defenders. Isagi then brings out his new lefty direct shot, leading him to score from his first attack of the game. Kaiser has no involvement in the first goal, and although his second goal was one of the best goals in the Neo-Egoist League where he transcends everybody on the field, he was only able to score the goal thanks to Isagi's play, with everyone on Ubers moving to neutralize him, allowing Kaiser to score a hyena goal. After just 2 games and off-screen training, Isagi has become a genuine threat to Kaiser both mentally and physically. And the massive wall that was the new Generation 11 no longer looks as big as it did at the beginning of the arc. What makes this even worse is that Isagi has been forced to level up while only having few options for teammates that are on his side. Meanwhile, Kaiser has had access to the team that he has grown accustomed to, which includes Ness, who is one of the best midfielders in the under-20s category, with an overall of 93 and a passing stat of 97, the highest in the Neo-Egoist League. In the Ubers game, Kaiser also gets completely outplayed by Barrow on his second goal by lining up Kaiser and Isagi perfectly to score a double nutmeg shot that neither Kaiser or Isagi could have predicted. To make matters even worse, Kaiser is pretty much irrelevant after this moment. Isagi and Hiyori steal the show and get the final goal, leading to Kaiser losing the striker's challenge that he himself issued to Isagi. This was Kaiser's second loss in a row to Isagi, and we're running out of excuses to give Kaiser the new Gen 11 striker. Kaiser himself admits that he is below Isagi's level and is forced to train harder than he has ever done before, and even develop a new weapon just so that he can beat Isagi. The PXG game is currently 9 chapters in, with 2 goals being scored so far, and Kaiser is yet to make his impact on the game. His Kaiser impact was neutralized by Rin, and he was just recently outplayed yet again by Isagi, who just scored his first attack of the game. Out of the main 4 in this game, that being Kaiser, Isagi, Rin and Shido, Kaiser is definitely looking like the weakest thus far and will have to pull off something insane to come off a fraud watch. If he loses to Isagi for a 3rd time in a row, then I think it's safe to say that the new Gen 11 title is cooked and some of the positions need to be rearranged. Moving on to the final new Gen 11 that we were introduced to, Don Lorenzo the Ace Crusher. Now, out of the 3 new Gen 11 that we know of, he might just be the most disappointing when it comes to his representation. Lorenzo, along with the rest of Ubers, are a mindless team that lack ego and are only able to follow orders from a leader, which already leads to the perception of Lorenzo being negative from the jump. Lorenzo in the Ubers game exists as a plot device to keep Kaiser out of the game for the majority of it. While it is impressive that he can keep Kaiser locked up for so long and also has impressive offensive capabilities, Isagi is able to completely take over the game due to Lorenzo's negligence and tunnel vision on Kaiser. Lorenzo's domineering stature seems to all but fade away after Barrow's goal the minute Hiyori is subbed onto the field. Hiyori is able to intercept a pass from Lorenzo and then begin an attack where he is able to dribble past multiple Uber's players. Hiyori then passes the ball to Isagi, who is able to beat Lorenzo on the ball and flick it over his head. Isagi Yoichi is able to beat Lorenzo on the ball and flick it over his head. Hiyori can also rainbow flick the ball over Lorenzo's head into a pass to Isagi before leaving with Lorenzo playing catch up. In the very next chapter, Hiyori fakes out Lorenzo, who thought he was going to shoot, flicks the ball off of Lorenzo's knee into a pass to Isagi that wins them the game. Throughout the course of this game, Lorenzo goes from the oppressive New Gen 11 defender that intercepts passes and makes tackles to the guy that can't even get near Isagi or Hiyori and only exists to keep Kaiser out of the way for the plot. The main problem with the representation of the New Gen 11 is that the ones that we have seen haven't consistently performed up to par, and the Blue Lock players have grown at such an insane rate that the New Gen 11 players are already being surpassed after just 4 games with training in between. For the remaining New Gen 11 to be a genuine threat to the top tier Blue Lock players, they would have to powercliff the previously shown New Gen 11 players to such a degree that we would never look at them the same. But that's it from your boy Crocodile. Stay tuned for my next video whenever I decide to make it.